Hi everybody, welcome back to Spooky Scary Storytime. I'm Ashley, your host, and today we're going to be talking about the Goatman. This is a legend that I have had requests to cover for a long time, and I hadn't really heard of the Goatman. I knew almost nothing about it, but after seeing how many requests I had and then seeing how many stories I had gotten about this creature, I realized I had to dedicate an entire episode to this because some of these stories are so good, they're so creepy, and I just want to keep it light this week in a continuation of the other episode I published earlier this week about other kinds of cryptids, including the Australian brawler and Bigfoot. I don't know, I think we all just need a collective distraction right now from everybody fighting on the internet. So whether you believe in the Goatman or not and you just want to look at these as entertainment, or if you actually want to do some research, I'm doing my best to include stories from across the board from different areas. I know the Goatman is primarily a legend in the DMV area. That's District of Columbia, Washington, Maryland, Virginia. I know that a lot of people in that area believe in the Goatman and that this is a popular legend around that area. Me not being from that area, I had never heard of it, like I said, but I did my best to research this as fully as I could while covering these stories, and so I'm going to include some things that I found in researching this topic as well. I'm going to read you 5 different emails that I have received about the Goatman, and you'll see that these differ in region and in descriptions of this creature. So whatever it is, you have to form your own opinion. Also keep in mind, with any story that I cover on Spooky Scary Storytime, I just receive these in email format, so I try to, in order to not get sued, approach every episode by saying these are for entertainment purposes only. I cannot prove the validity of any of these emails, okay? These could be from anyone. However, I also encourage you to send your Spooky Scary Storytime because that's what makes it cool. I generally believe a lot of these people just in the way that they share their feelings throughout the stories. I feel like that's what makes these stories feel authentic to me as I read through them. But I encourage you to use your own discernment. That said, please don't bully anyone in the comments because these people, even if they are anonymous, will be reading the comments, okay? So if you have nothing nice to say, feel free to move along. We always welcome constructive criticism, just don't call people crazy or things like that. Here is that first story from a park ranger. I don't usually write things like this, but after catching a few of your episodes about local legends, I figured I'd finally share what happened on one of my overnight shifts. I was a ranger attached to security detail around the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center back in the early 2000s. The facility is surrounded by big swaths of government-owned farmland and woods. Most people don't even realize how much wild space exists behind those gates. It was late fall and the air was heavy because it had been raining all week when the motion alarms along the fence kept tripping. At first we chalked it up to deer, which happens all the time, but the pattern was strange because alarms were flaring in a line, which meant something or someone was pacing the perimeter. I drove out with one of the guards to check the sensors. That's when we heard hooves, but not the light stepping sound you'd expect from a deer or a goat. These were heavy, deliberate, and fast, circling beyond the reach of our floodlight. Every time we swung the beam toward the sound stopped. When we finally caught sight of it, my stomach turned. The thing was crouched at the tree line, higher than any buck. It had broad shoulders, long arms braced against the dirt, and horns that curved back over its head. I had no idea what I was looking at, and I remember blinking my eyes a couple times because I really thought I might be hallucinating. Its eyes reflected green like an animal's, but there was something calculating in them, like it recognized me and was looking through me instead of at me. It shifted, dropped to all fours, and the sound of its hooves on the gravel was louder than it should have been. It sounded like an earthquake. Before we could react, it bolted faster than anything I've ever seen on 2 legs or 4, as fast as I imagine a cheetah could move, but moving like a deer. By the time we reached the fence, all that remained were deep prints in the mud. We went to check them out, and they were all cleft like a goat's, but the stride was human long. We filed a report, but our supervisor told us to leave the incident out of the nightly log. Probably a prankster in costume, he told us, though none of us believed it. A week later, the area was closed for equipment testing, and we weren't assigned there again. A few nights later, I was back on a different post when Carl, one of the older security guys, came out to smoke. He'd been there since the late 80s and knew every strange rumor that passed through Goddard. He asked pretty quiet if I'd seen the thing by the fence. When I nodded, he just shook his head and said, "So you met the Goatman." According to Carl, folks around Bowie and the old Beltsville farms have whispered about him for decades, not as a lab escapee, but as something far older. He said his grandmother, who is native, told stories of a walker between worlds, a spirit with hooves who could cross from one place to another when the air went still, usually at the edge of a clearing or where 2 creeks meet. Carl swore he had seen it himself years before my encounter. He said he was posted by the water tower on a morning dawn when the woods went completely quiet. Then he said out of the mist he saw a figure that was tall, rough-haired, with horns sweeping back over its head. He said it moved strangely, like its legs didn't belong in this world, and the air around it shimmered, as if heat were rising off cold ground. He said he'd locked eyes with it, and for a second he felt like he was being pulled somewhere else. a place where trees bent in impossible directions, like the world was upside down. Then it blinked and the shimmer was gone. The thing turned and slipped between the trees, leaving only the smell of wet earth and copper. Carl told me that some legends warn the Goatman doesn't just guard the woods. He said that he hunts anyone foolish enough to follow him across. He then told me that the fence we have isn't to keep people out. It's to keep him in most of the time, or at least to prevent others from seeing it. I laughed it off while he was in there, but I didn't sleep much after that. Even now, I can't drive past those farms at night without checking the tree line. After talking with Carl, I couldn't shake what he said about the traveling dimensional spirit, or that old native legend he claimed, so I pulled out every archive I could get my hands on: libraries, county folklore folders, university papers, anything about the Goatman and the indigenous legends of this land. You should look into it. There is more that points toward the existence of this creature than not. What'd you guys think? Because to me, park ranger stories are sometimes the creepiest ones. I don't know if it's because I just think of park rangers as typically logical people who probably see a lot of strange and creepy things being in the woods at night all the time. And so whenever there's something that unsettles them, it unsettles me. We're moving across the country for this next story, and I'm just gonna patch in the video that I posted about this last night. But this is from a blackjack dealer in Las Vegas who said he had a strange regular called Mr. Sage who told him about how he encountered the Goatman. If you follow me on short form platforms, you may have heard me tell this story already. If you have, just skip forward, and here is the timestamp where you can skip to in order to bypass this story, because the others in this episode I have not yet told. Blackjack dealer messaged and told me about the strangest regular he ever had and the story he told him about meeting the Goatman. Now, they called this regular Mr. Sage because Mr. Sage always wore sage green suits. Not always, but a lot of the time. And everybody in the casino knew him because he was a regular. He wasn't overly friendly, but he and this blackjack dealer had sort of a rapport. The casino was an older one off the main strip in Las Vegas, and there were a lot of slow nights in off-season. Mr. Sage would only come in when it was slow, and the blackjack dealer liked him because even though he was kind of quiet, he had this really funny, dry sense of humor, and his token line was, "Let's see if Lady Luck is taking bribes tonight," and he always bet with $333. Okay, that's important for later. Mr. Sage was probably in his mid-50s. He had slicked back silver hair, and he wore these like old-timey suits that kind of reminded this blackjack dealer of like Rat Pack era. He had a heavy turquoise ring that he always wore on his pinky, and everybody in the casino like knew who this guy was, and some of them even whispered stories about him. Like one of the cocktail waitresses said that her boyfriend was one of the maintenance guys for the casino, and one day Mr. Sage had approached him and started asking him all kinds of questions about the energetic harmonics of the building, whatever that meant. The valet guys was a rideshare driver on the side or something, and said that one night he dropped him off way down in the desert where there was like no turnoff point and no vehicle. But anyway, all of this was just rumor, right? This guy had a lot of mystery around him, and this blackjack dealer said that that was pretty strange because like they had a lot of strange people that would come in this casino, but Mr. Sage was just the strangest. So in February of 2023, he's working one night and it is just completely dead in this casino. He said it was so quiet you could hear the ice machine humming from down the hall, and Mr. Sage is the only one at his table. So he's like trying to make conversation. They had that kind of rapport, and he mentions to Mr. Sage that he and his wife are going to take a little quick getaway. They're going to go hiking and stargazing in the Valley of Fire, and they rented a little cabin in Overton. Mr. Sage stopped what he was doing and he says, "Valley of Fire, it's the wrong time of year for that." Blackjack dealer's like, "No, we're avid hikers. It's February. It's only going to be like 60s, 70s. Like, it's too hot in the summer, I know, but like February is perfect for it. So what do you mean wrong time?" And Mr. Sage is like, "You ever spend much time in the desert?" And the dealer's like, "Yeah, I've been out there. You know, I grew up here." And he's like, "Well, have you ever seen a shadow that moves in the opposite direction of the wind?" And the dealer's like, "No." And he thinks he's about to crack another joke because Mr. Sage would say things like, "Oh, the house always wins unless the house is haunted," and just like silly things like that. So he was waiting for this punchline. But Mr. Sage doesn't smile or anything. He just like leans in over the table and he's like, "I like you and I fear for your safety and I don't feel like you should go out there at this time of year." Blackjack dealer brushes him off and he says, "We'll be fine, I promise. I'll see you this time next week." And Mr. Sage stands up and he says, "Okay, but promise me if you hear hooves in the desert, you will not turn around, because turning around lets it decide which version of you it wants." Again, the blackjack dealer is just waiting for this punchline, but it doesn't come. And so he just kind of goes back to what he's doing, but he couldn't let it go. And so finally he says, "Okay, what are the hooves? What are you talking about?" Mr. Sage just looks at him for a long minute, like he's studying him, deciding if he wants to say something. And he averts his eyes and he looks down and he says kind of quietly, like in a hushed voice, he's like, "Well, people call it the Goatman, but that name is just like a shadow of what it is. That's not really what it is. It's kind of this traveler between worlds." He tells him it's not an animal, it's like a collector. It's a news carrier of sorts, and it carries news and pieces of people between dimensions. The blackjack dealer's kind of just like, "Well, you lost me." And Mr. Sage is like, "Well, think about it like it takes the futures of people who might have chosen a different path." Blackjack dealer says that this is not normally something that he would have bought into. Like, he's not a superstitious person. He doesn't really believe in things like that. But he felt the way that he said it made all of the hair on his arms raise. Like, he was just generally creeped out. And so he said, "How do you know this?" And Mr. Sage says, "Well, one day I made the mistake of turning around and looking at it." He tells the blackjack dealer that when he was in his 30s, he'd worked a job surveying power lines near the Sloan Canyon. It was a night in February, and he said he was out one night past dusk, and all of the wind died down, and he heard the crunching of hooves behind him, and he thought it was a stray burro, so he turned around. But when he turned around, he said the world split. Like, the world split in two. Nothing made sense. Time made no sense. Space made no sense. And about 20 feet away, he saw himself, like another version, standing there, staring off in a different direction of the desert. And behind this other version of himself, he saw a tall, shadowy feature with horns protruding from its head. And he looks up and he looks back at the blackjack dealer, and he said, "He didn't take me. I got lucky, maybe, but..." Says, "I've spent enough time out there to know that there are other things that live out there and they're interested in us. And so you have to promise me if you hear hooves behind you, just don't turn around." Blackjack dealer said after he told him this, it was so quiet in the casino, like he didn't know what to say. Like, he was just looking at him. He wasn't sure if he should believe him or not. So finally he just says, "Well, has anything strange ever happened to you?" Mr. Sage looks at him again and he says, "Yeah, more than I'd like to admit." And so the blackjack dealer's like, "What?" And he's like, "Well, cards started turning up. I would find them all over. And I thought it was just because I was on the strip, but they were always threes. And then one night I just came to in a diner. I had no recollection of driving there. The waitress was dropping off my bill and it was $3.33 for a cup of coffee." Then he looks down and he motions to his stacks of chips, which are set into stacks of threes. And he says, "That's why I buy into this amount. Like, it keeps me tethered. If I keep it in check, then I can keep everything in check." So the dealer laughs and he says, "I think that you're just superstitious. A lot of people that come in here are superstitious about numbers." And Mr. Sage says, "No, every time the number shows up, it means the line is thin that night. It means I should mind my footing. And the more that I do this, the more it keeps that line in check." The dealer says, "What lines?" And Mr. Sage says, "Ley lines." And he said, "It's essentially the earth's veins." He said, "You can look at maps, but ley lines don't run with roads." He says they run with the energetic grid of the earth. And some nights those lines get thin. And when the lines get thin, that's when things cross over. Then he says, "Enough of that. That's why I warned you about the Valley of Fire this time of year, because the lines get thin this time of year, and I don't want you to get caught on the wrong side of it." So the dealer's like, "Well, what happens if I get caught on the wrong side of it, And he says, "Well, I said it's a collector. Like, it'll notice your debts. It'll notice your debts and the opportunities that you didn't take along the way, and it'll take those from you. Missed opportunities, your wrong choices, the decisions you didn't make. It's keeping a tally. Wants the versions of you that you might have been." And the dealer's like, "To do what with?" And he just shrugs and he says, "I don't know." He says, "I don't want to find out again." He's like, "That's why I stay anchored." And he points to his chips. He says, "But I can't stop it. I've already seen it. I can't bargain with it. So I just pay attention to the signs. 333s, the hooves, the shadows, the energetic vibration of where I'm at. And that's how I stay clear of it and stay tethered to the version of myself that I am." Then he taps the table 3 times, which seemed deliberate. And he says, "I think that's a sign enough for tonight." Stands up and he says, "I know it sounds crazy, but I wouldn't be telling you this if I didn't like you. But there are things out there that collect debts you did not even know you owed." He said, "Do your best to stay clear of them." And after that night, Mr. Sage never came back in the casino. Now, regarding that story, the blackjack dealer ended his email by saying that he and his wife did in fact go hiking and camping in Overton that weekend. He did say some creepy things happened. However, he didn't go into detail. So I emailed him back. I sent him the link to the original video of that, and I'm hoping that he gets back to me because I really want to know what happened next. I was so intrigued by that story. I've got a few more about the Goatman, but before I get into those, I actually want to tell you guys a little bit about what I found in my own research about the Goatman. This is unsettling to say the least. So first, let's talk about the 1971 Lizama paper, which is essentially the birth of the Goatman legend. In May of 1971, George Lizama, who was a student at the University of Maryland, submitted an undergraduate folklore project titled The Goatman of Tucker Road. And for his assignment, Lizama conducted interviews with local residents in Prince George's County, Maryland, collecting various versions of the Goatman legend. And these accounts described a creature resembling a man with a goat's face, often associated with eerie noises, dog deaths, and sightings along roads like Tucker Road in Clinton, Maryland. Lizama's paper was then archived in the Maryland Folklore Archives, where it remained relatively obscure until October of 1971. And at that time, reporter Karen Holster discovered the paper and published an article in the Prince George's County News, which brought the Goatman legend to a wider audience. Holster's report suggested that the origins of the Goatman might be linked to the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, which added a layer of intrigue to the tale. Now, following the publication of Holzer's article, the Goatman legend gained significant traction in the local community. By November of 1971, a follow-up story reported the decapitation of a family dog in Bowie, Maryland, which residents then attributed to the Goatman. That incident fueled public fear and fascination, leading to increased reports of sightings and encounters. The legend kind of became a rite of passage for local teenagers who would then venture out to areas like Fletchertown Road in search of this creature. The Goatman even made its way into popular culture, being referenced in the 1973 film American Graffiti and inspiring various local legends and folklore. From there, several origin stories from the Goatman kind of emerged. There was the mad scientist theory, which is a popular narrative that suggests that a scientist at the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center named Dr. Stephen Fletcher conducted a failed experiment to combine human and goat DNA, resulting in the creation of the Goatman. And then there's the hermit theory, which is another version of the origin story that portrays the Goatman as a reclusive hermit with a goat-like appearance who lives in the woods and occasionally terrorizes locals. These varying stories contributed to the Goatman's enduring presence in Maryland's folklore. Now, for those of you who are interested in exploring this further and exploring George Lazima's original 1971 paper, you can find it in the Maryland Folklife Archives at the University of Maryland. In researching this, I was also interested in exploring the native folklore around it. And I want to be very careful when covering native folklore because I'm not native. However, everything that I have found has been documented. And so I feel like it's fair use information. None of these are my own opinions. Okay. So this legend also seems to be rooted deeply in the region's Native American folklore in Maryland, particularly that of the Piscataway people, whose ancestral lands encompass much of the present-day Prince George's County. Their spiritual beliefs seem to be rich with stories of liminal beings, which are entities that inhabit the thresholds between worlds, such as the boundaries of water and land, or the transitions between day and night. And the Piscataway worldview is deeply intertwined with the natural environment. They believe in a supreme being named Menet, who directed lesser deities, and creation began in the waters, and a woman, often referred to as Sky Woman, descended through a hole in the clouds, and she was aided by various animals and ended up landing on the back of a turtle floating in a great sea. And their creation narrative sort of amplifies this significance in their culture of natural elements and spiritual connections. Their reverence for natural thresholds, places where different elements meet, aligns with their broader beliefs in liminality. So these beings then are sort of guardians of nature and ancestral knowledge, often becoming visible only to those who approach with respect and understanding. And their presence in the liminal spaces of the forest echoes the characteristics attributed to the Goatman, who is an entity essentially associated with the margins of human habitation, such as forests and backroads. And while there's no direct record of the Goatman in Piscataway mythology, the creature seems to embody these themes, right? Like these themes that are already present in their folklore. The Goatman's association with eerie noises, for example, sightings along back roads, and its depiction as a horned hoof being resonate with the characteristics of liminal spirits in Native American traditions. All of that said, then, I would argue that the Goatman legend, as collected by George Lazima in 1971, reflects a modern manifestation of these ancient themes, right? Like the creature's presence in areas like Fletchertown Road near the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center places it at the intersection of human development and then the natural world, which is essentially a threshold space where the known meets the unknown. And I guess that could be said about the desert too, right? Like certain places are developed in the desert as tourist destinations that were once sacred as parts of the natural world. So all of that said, what I conclude about the Goatman, at least, and I could be way off here, so I'm curious to know y'all's thoughts as well. But in my mind, the Goatman is less likely to be a mutated scientist or just a ghost story, but probably more as like a folkloric archetype given flesh through thought form by science and fear. It's something that began as a myth, was overlaid with experimental rumors, and then reinforced by repeated sightings. And though each one was different, each one suggests that he's not bound by the laws that we expect. This next story came from someone named Abby in Arizona, and that's actually pretty close to where that last story takes place, so that's an interesting thing to note. I'd like to share the story of when my brother and I encountered the Goatman. I was around 7 years old at the time, and so my memory of certain details is a little hazy, but I'll share what I can. My family and I were on vacation at the Scottsdale Plaza Resort in Arizona, staying in one of their many villas. On our first night there, my dad sent my brother out to get some ice from the machine outside, and I decided to join him for some fresh air. As we walked, I noticed a figure standing on a balcony. As we got closer, I could clearly make out his features. The man had a body of a human, but his head was like a goat's with horns and hooves. My brother and I were frozen in place, just staring at it. I turned briefly to check on my brother, who was still getting the ice, but also staring at the Goatman. When I looked back, the figure was gone. Panicked, we rushed back into the villa and immediately told our parents what we had seen. That night, my dad heard cries coming from the outside, and he woke us all up and made us all sleep in the same room as him. When we returned home from vacation, my family did some research on the place but found nothing that could explain what we encountered. I recently searched if others might have had similar experiences, but I couldn't find anything. I'm not sure if it was some sort of mask, but it remains one of the most unsettling moments of my life, and I remember it vividly. I'm reaching out with the hope that one of your viewers might have an explanation or theory on what my brother and I saw that night.
Short, but to the point, right? And I think that that's what makes these stories so unsettling, is that there's so many sightings of this creature. This next story is from someone named Latasha, who says that her sister will actually vouch that they saw this as well.
Latasha and her sister say that they saw a satyr, which is a creature from Greek mythology. It's part human and part goat, and they typically have the upper body of a man with the same torso, arms, and sometimes a bearded face as a man would, but then they have the legs, tail, and sometimes horns of a goat. In mythology, satyrs are often associated with certain gods, and they represent wild, untamed nature, lust, and mischief. And in later European folklore and fantasy, like in Narnia or Dungeons and Dragons, satyrs appear as woodland spirits or fawn-like beings. They're playful, but sometimes dangerous. Latasha says this story takes place 27 years ago. She said she was pregnant with her first son, and her teen sister Felicia worked at a fast food restaurant about 4 blocks from their house. It was during the summer, and her sister was closing on this particular night. Latasha picked her up from work, and it was around 12:30 in the morning. The drive to pick her up was uneventful, but on the drive back, they saw something. It crossed the street right in front of them. She said she had to slam in the brakes because it came out of absolutely nowhere. It just appeared in front of the car. It walked upright but had the lower body of an animal, maybe a goat, but a humanoid upper body. It didn't have skin like a man, but was covered in fur. She said when we researched what we saw, the closest thing we could come up with was a satyr, but whatever it was, she felt like it was malevolent. She said as they looked at it, it turned and looked them dead in the eyes knowingly, and it had a sinister look. She turned to her sister and said, "Do you see what I see?" And her sister was like, "Yeah, I see it." And she said they were both so scared, and they both promised not to tell anyone because they were like, "Are we collectively hallucinating? Like, what's going on?" And she said neither of them actually even talked about it with anyone else for over 20 years. A little more context, she said the house that they had stopped in front of was this really beautiful house, but it stays perpetually empty, and the landlord cannot keep tenants. Renters claim that the house is haunted, and the last renters were a very religious family who immigrated from South America and were very familiar with the spirit world. She said they were the longest tenants for over 2 years, and they had Catholic candles all around the perimeter of the house, but they too ended up moving. She said, "I don't think that house has been rented now for over 5 years, and it's a really nice house, mind you, around 2,000 square feet, 4 bedrooms, and a full basement. It's listed at around $250,000 in their small town," and she said for this house to remain empty in their area is very telling.
I'm not sure where Latasha and her sister's story takes place. However, I think it's safe to say that these stories are coming from all over. So no area, at least in the US, I don't think is off limits for this creature to appear necessarily. This final story comes to us again from the DMV area in Virginia. This story gave me that feeling of how I used to feel when I would read old Goosebumps books or scary stories to tell in the dark. That just inherent feeling of dread, like something else is out there. You'll see what I'm talking about when I read you this story.
You can call me Tom for this story, and you may have heard of the Goatman before. Even though I'm from the DMV area, I never gave much thought to those stories myself until one night when my wife and I had what I can only describe as a brush with him. We were driving back late after a wedding somewhere near one of those wooded back roads in the DMV area. Although I don't want to give too much away about where I live because I don't want anyone that I know to hear that I told this story. You know how people are. They're really quick to label you as crazy if you start talking about these things out loud, and I like to think of myself as a logical person. Anyway, it was quiet and later than we were meant to be out. It was the kind of dark where your headlights seemed to disappear just a few feet ahead of you with your headlights. I remember thinking that the trees looked off. The branches seemed to bend closer toward the road, almost like they were leaning in to watch us pass. It was an extremely eerie feeling. My wife was a little intoxicated as we had a lot of fun at the reception, but she even mentioned that she felt like something was following us, though neither of us saw another pair of headlights the entire stretch. A few minutes later, we both heard it. At first, I thought it was just something shifting in the trunk, but then it came again. There was this heavy, deliberate clop clop right over our heads. That's the only way I know how to describe it, but it was another and another. And then we realized it was Hooves. It was clear as day, walking across the roof of our car. We were frozen in place, listening to the sound of something pacing up there, like it was walking back and forth and deciding whether to come down. Granted, we were still moving, so I pulled over so fast and my heart was pounding, expecting to see dents or maybe even an animal sliding off. But when I looked around, there was nothing. The road behind us was empty, the woods were completely still and quiet, but even the air felt heavy and strange, like everything around us was holding its breath. We drove the rest of the way home in silence. Neither of us could shake the feeling that it hadn't just been our imagination, that maybe it was the Goatman who had decided to walk across our car that night. I want to mention that I had not had anything to drink. I have been sober for 17 years, though, like I said, my wife was intoxicated. We both heard the sound.
So what do you guys think it is? Because I just might be a believer now. If you have a story of your own about the Goatman or anything else spooky, it could just be a creepy roommate story, please feel free to send it to me. My website is dogoodstaybad.com. You can fill out the form on the story submissions page and just let me know if you want to be named or anonymous. I don't mind tagging people, and I also respect and understand the stigma that's attached sometimes when telling these types of stories. But either way, privacy is important to me. So just let me know and I'll make it happen. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope everybody is doing well and spreading love out there. If you haven't already, please remember to subscribe to this channel. If you are listening to this on YouTube, there is a new feature called the hype button, and if you hit that, I think it's free from what I understand. If you hit that, it actually boosts my video. I'm really trying to expand my YouTube outreach. I know that a lot of you guys love these stories, and hitting that button or just leaving a comment or liking the video will help it reach more people, and then in turn helps me out and helps me tell more spooky scary stories. I have merch on my website, including a cute little Spooky Scary Storytime mug, some Do Good Stay Bad shirts and sweatshirts. I have a Patreon if you want to show monthly support. I think you can sign up for as little as $3 a month. If not, that's totally okay. I appreciate all of your attention and you just being here and being part of this community. It's amazing. I cannot tell you guys how much I enjoy engaging with you and appreciate you all trusting me enough to share your spooky, scary stories. Until next time, I'll see ya.